Hey everyone, welcome back to the Kirkpatrick podcast. It is Vanessa, and I've got my very dear friend Jordan Rawlinson joining us today. Hey Jordan, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Vanessa?
I'm good. How are we doing with your word of the year, power? Are you feeling powerful today?
I am. I feel like I keep seeing it pop up in all these different places, and it's just, I don't know, it feels like a sign from the universe. Like, yeah, keep focusing on it.
Love it. Love it. So I'm excited for today. We've got a very exciting episode to kind of kick off the series as we were, chatting about, the podcast, the new season, and kind of what are some of the things that people need, through the conversations that I'm having, that I know you're having. We have a lot of conversation about overcomplicating evaluation.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to bring it back to the basics and the foundation. It's actually kind of like my same feelings about instructional design. Like I think that we focus so much on the tools and like all of the fancy things, and not so much on like the foundation and the basics of it all, that that actually ends up inhibiting part of our solutions, right? Like, so it doesn't matter. Like I actually have this TikTok video I created, that was basically saying like it doesn't really matter if you're using the shiniest object, the latest gamification, if the instructional design and like the writing and things like that are not solid. What you have is a pig, and you just put lipstick on a pig. And so I feel the same about evaluation. It's a little spicy, but if the basics of evaluation are not done, you've just got a shiny pig with with some lipstick on. But that's what we're here for today. So we are in our March Madness series, and it's back to the basics. This is our kickoff episode. And so, Jordan, I'll kick it over to you. What are some common challenges as someone that facilitates so many of our programs that you're hearing from participants or from people maybe that you're interacting with outside of our programs as to why they're not evaluating, or challenges they're having when they're evaluating?
Yeah. I think that it can boil down to just a handful of things, really. So, I want to say the first, probably the biggest barrier is folks feeling like they don't have control of the process. So, it's not even always about, not understanding what evaluation is or what the levels are. Sometimes folks come in with some of that understanding, and it's just kind of getting that resistance from their organization. Like the system isn't set up for them to be able to have access to data or access to participants, and really not having control of the process. And so a lot of those conversations start to turn into how can you think about your influence on the process? And even if you're not the one that's, directing it, you might not be in that senior executive position where you're, designing the evaluation strategy. However, you are connected to the business still, and you have a role to solve problems, essentially, that hopefully everyone in the organization wants solved. So, how can you use that common goal to kind of build your influence, to overcome some of those perceived control barriers? So, I think that's one. And then I think the second barrier is maybe more on that lack of understanding. So, thinking, like you're saying, evaluation has to be more complicated than it is. Um, and not realizing that some of the things they're already doing might actually count as evaluation data, or some of the things that the managers of the training participants are already doing could be something that's used as an evaluation tool.
Ooh, I love what you said there. You know, it's like that formal versus informal collection of data,
Hmm.
and not realizing that there is so much data out there around us that we can use just about bringing that in and understanding what is data and the context of that data, right? So I feel like I may be repeating myself from like another, no, I said this in yesterday's webinar, so it's not on this podcast. I was saying, I was working with, and you might have been on this call, actually, I think you were, with one of our customers in the DoD, and they were working on the senior leadership program, and they're like, we can't do level 3 because we can never get in touch with them. They're so busy and things like that. And in my mind, I was like, well, that silence is data, you know, that's giving you the understanding that we need to shift how, you know, perhaps the program, right? Because when we start to then think and branch out into support mechanisms, on the job support and things like that, and be able to continue to build that community, that's giving you data that's saying, hey, they don't have enough time to complete a survey, right? So they may not have enough time to continue on with, you know, the required drivers and things like that. So how can I adjust our delivery so that it fits into their day, or, you know what I mean? They're into their workflow. And so I think that there's a lot of, you know, even silence gives a lot of data. And I think people don't perceive those things as data because it's not being spit out to you from SurveyMonkey, if you will, right? And that is that's a challenge to really think about how to also collate all that information and what to do with that.
Yeah. And I think in that situation, and in plenty of other situations that we've kind of come across, part of the problem is also a lack of specificity. So if you don't actually know what it is you are looking for, like very clearly and specifically, then evaluation is certainly going to feel like a challenge because you don't really know where to start. You don't know what you're looking for. You're doing it retroactively after the program's already been done. And not to mention, if you don't know what the specific goals are of especially behavior change at level 3, your participants probably don't either. So it just becomes a whole mess.
Yeah. So you just brought something up that's very interesting to me. And this idea of knowing the goal of evaluation. If we're thinking about getting back to basics, how do you figure out what your goal is for evaluating?
I mean, there's probably a few different answers to it, but in general, why we evaluate is to improve what we're doing. And you want to be specific about like what part of what we're doing do we want to improve? And a lot of that comes with the initial requests that you might get from a stakeholder to design a program. That's often what we hear is how it starts. A stakeholder or someone in the organization comes to you and says, we need this training program. And then you try to evaluate it after the fact. But if you don't have those specific goals, like what is the goal of this training program, and even more, what problem is this stakeholder trying to solve? That is why you're evaluating. You want to know that you solve the problem, but you have to define it first, right?
Well, and I think too, if we even think of it like a level above, there's also a goal for your unit, department, you know, insert however you call yourself here, of like, what is your goal? Like, why are you even doing evaluation, right? Is it just to improve the program? Like, I think that there's like also that higher level of like, are you satisfied with level 1 and 2 data? If yes, then okay, you're good. Then that's all you need. If the answer is no, then you all need to make it a goal for your unit, department, your team to say, we need to focus on doing just starting with level 3 evaluation, right? At least getting to that. Although I never, you know, I have thoughts and feels about that. Is I think if you're going to do level 3, you might as well do level 4 because you have to plan starting at level 4, but there we are. But if that's your goal, then do a small piece, you know, make that a goal for your unit, your department for that year to do it for one program, right? Something that you can, like, don't pick something so hard, right? Pick something that you can control, something smaller. Try it on something small to get like the mechanisms in place and start to build that practice and that expertise. And then you can launch it at a larger scale for your organization. I think sometimes we try to eat the elephant all in like one big bite as opposed to one bite at a time. And we don't pilot and test.
Yeah.
And that goes the same as for evaluation, right? So I think, for a basic, like what I want you guys to start with and get out of this episode in particular is understanding that you need to understand what your goal is personally with evaluation and professionally, right? Or as a unit and, personally for yourself. So we've got a lot of folks that are listening that are experts in evaluation or they practice it, right? Often, and they're doing their level 1 and 2. And we got a lot of these questions, right? Like, how do I get to level 3? And I think that there's that overcomplication of, wanting to measure behavior change. And to your point, not realizing that there are certain things that are happening that will help you collect that data that are probably already occurring, right? So likely the managers are meeting with their employees and, on a monthly, weekly, quarterly basis, whatever that cadence is. And so instead of asking to schedule another meeting with your employee in order to discuss what it is that they learned and how they're applying, right, to have that sort of touch base, including your questions, and it's like 1 or 2 questions, right? Not a ton, as part of their next one-on-one. It's like multi-purpose programming, right? Like let's get a lot of bang out of our buck. And instead of adding one more thing, I think often we think of, let me add another thing because I need this thing done, as opposed to saying, let me step back and say, we've got these things that are already happening. How can I tack on to that in a small way to understand to get my information back so I can do that level 3 measurement?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the quotes that we use in the Bronze program comes from James Clear, book Atomic Habits, right? He talks about how systems are really important. You can set great goals as long as you want, right? Like, great, you have some goals set, but what's actually going to get you there is a system. So, like you're saying, figure out what systems are in place or create systems that can almost just start to run automatically. I'm a big lately, I feel like I've been on I don't know what the right word is, like maybe my soapbox about self-monitoring. Like,
Mm-hmm.
participants of your training should also be really invested in monitoring their own behavior, right? So how do you create, whether it's a lot of folks are talking about using journals, people are using like very simple check boxes every week. You submit a very easy to complete self-reflection or self-report about whatever the specific behavior is that you're hoping they change as a result of training. So just figuring out, like, how do you work with the systems that maybe already exist or
Mm-hmm.
build systems in place that have a low, I don't know, barrier of resistance.
Yeah, exactly. It's really taking that habit stacking principle from Atomic Habits,
Yeah.
and really saying, well, how can we apply that sort of principle to what it is that we're doing, right? So for, again, something else I said yesterday in the webinar, how funny. So what we talk about, or what James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits is, if you want to create a new habit or create a change, you want to be able to stack it with something that you already automatically do. So that way it becomes more routine, right? So the example, I think provided, or I don't remember where I heard this example, but originally is, if you were working on your health, you want to take a multivitamin every day. Like, this is something I literally need to do. But if you want to take a multivitamin every single day, instead of just leaving it in the kitchen, like your girl does here, right? In this one cabinet with coffee cups, which I don't always drink a cup of coffee in the morning. I brush my teeth though every single day, right? Take the vitamins, put it next to my toothbrush, so that way in the morning when I'm brushing my teeth, I was like, oh, right, I need to take my vitamins. I take my vitamins and then I brush my teeth, right? So doing it was something that you automatically do. And then over time, that habit starts to become second nature. So that you don't even, then it becomes automatic that you don't have to think about taking your vitamins every single day because you already do it every single day with something that you already do. If you were going to, like me, put the vitamins in the cabinet that you don't necessarily go to every day, it's hidden, it's, not something that you really think about. I can tell you from actual experience right now, you will not take the vitamins. And that is the same thing with evaluation, right? You're not building it in from the beginning and then saying, okay, I need to get manager input, right? About how their employees are doing on this task, performing this new behavior, these new skills, aligning with this new process, this new policy. I can send a survey. Sure. Your survey result or the response rate will probably be pretty low. But instead, I know that, managers have to accomplish this task already, right? They have to already do this annual survey or this quarterly survey or complete this report for HR. Is there a way I can partner with that person and say, hey, do you mind if I just ask a couple of questions just to see how we're doing, with our goal of, of improving in this skill area, improving in this area? The answer will probably be yes, right? Because it's not adding one more thing on someone's plate. So it's thinking about that multi-purpose kind of stacking approach.
Yeah.
So we could not go back to the basics without going back to the basics on the Kirkpatrick model. So Jordan, give us a little taste of what it is like to be in a program with you and give us a quick overview of, the 4 levels. So like you're at a dinner party and obviously the Kirkpatrick model comes up, right? Because why wouldn't it come up at a dinner party? How do you explain the levels?
Yeah. Honestly, you'd be surprised how often it can come up. I was at a New Year's Eve party actually, and we were talking about strategy and using the model even in that way too. So that's funny you say that. Okay, so the model as an overview. So when you think about any initiative, any goal you're trying to achieve, usually there's a planning process, right?
Yep.
You have to plan how you're going to get there.
Yep.
So using the model, we recommend working backwards from what we call level 4 all the way back to level 1. Level 4 is about results. So that is like, what's your end goal? You need to define very specifically what it is you're trying to achieve. How will you know that you've achieved it?
Yep.
Then you work backwards to level 3, and that's about behavior. So what actions need to change or begin or stop to actually get you to those results that you just identified at level 4. So you got to specifically define what actions or behavior has to look like at level 3. And of course, how you'll monitor that. Then working backwards from there, level 2 is about learning. So what foundations from a learning perspective, whether it's knowledge, skills, maybe they need to change their attitude, confidence, or commitment around it in order to change that behavior. Then after level 1, you understand what learning needs to happen to achieve that behavior change. You also, of course, want to think about how are we going to make the program relevant and a positive experience for them? How will we evaluate if we've achieved that? And that's level 1 reaction.
Yep.
So that's your plan. Then in execution, you work up the plan. So you start at 1 and all the way to 4. Usually that looks like hosting the training. So you're collecting that reaction from the participants for level 1 data, hopefully during the training, because that's a little bit more effective with your resources. You're looking at level 2 learning results. Did they learn something from the program? Level 3 is then back in the performance environment. Now that they have the foundations from training, how are they changing their behavior and how are we intentionally supporting that behavior change? And then of course, what happens as a result of the behavior change is going to be your level 4 results. So you're looking at how that behavior is actually driving different outputs, different results that align with what your program goal was in the first place.
Um, I love what you said about the intentional like support, right? Like how are
Mhm.
we intentionally going to be supporting and holding folks accountable to make sure that these things happen? Um, it feels like sometimes training is like a crock pot and people set it and forget it. Right. So they're like, I'm going to put all of the makings, I might even put it together the evaluation plan and then I'm just going to let it go. And without the systems in place to be able to set it and forget it, you don't actually ever come up with like a really great, amazing recipe like you sometimes can from a crock pot. I'm a huge advocate of the crock pot and the air fryer. Um, and like if the evaluation does like, that's not how that works. But if you have the right systems, the right technology in place, you can set it and have it automate and have it run. And then you are coming in and checking in at a specific interval that works best for your plan. So I think that it's a really, evaluation is not something that can be not just like what Jim says, right, an afterthought. It's something that can't be forgotten when it is starting and running. You can't, and then training is not something that you can just have someone do and then, not reinforce or not provide those opportunities to have those refreshers. We need those additional reps and those additional practice to create that behavior change. And if you are someone that wants a more of a refresher on the Kirkpatrick model, we have, I believe it was our second podcast episode ever that we did that was all about an overview of the model. So make sure you check that podcast episode out. So Jordan, gotta ask, favorite level?
It's still level 3 for me.
Still level 3. I am becoming a level 4 gal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, I don't think I'll ever leave my first, like, I think the level 3 is like my first boyfriend. It's always gonna be my first love.
Your first love.
Yeah. Like I'll always have a fondness for it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something about level 4 and thinking about what are the different things I need to, like, what I love about the way that we talk about level 4 is in the leading indicators versus just the end result. Right? Because there's a lot of little things that are going to help me understand if I'm on my way. And you know me, I love a good to-do list. I love crossing things off that have already been done. And I need those dopamine hits to keep going where I can see leading, like short-term wins, these small leading indicators starting to move in that right direction to say like, okay, we are headed towards our North Star, like where we are trying to go. But if I'm just waiting to finally end up at that destination, I'll get so demoralized and I'll get so, distracted and moving on to like the next thing, right? Because it's hard to stay invested without seeing those small incremental wins. And I think when we talk about stakeholders and like, how do we keep them engaged? Like we know that it takes time to see end results. And what we do is we say, we need more time. We need more time for people to like do the practice and all of that, instead of identifying like, what are these short-term wins that we are currently having because we instituted this new program, this new policy, this new initiative that we can then report back. So they themselves get those dopamine hits and say like, okay, yep, we're heading in the right direction. We'll continue to stay the course. We'll continue to invest. They know intellectually that things take time. So yeah, I'm starting to become a little bit of a level 4 gal. For now. So, obviously we're biased, right? We love the Kirkpatrick model. But it is also something that, we're biased, but we came into the organization, right? Like Don was not my father, nor my grandfather, although I like to say that he is now. But I came in as an instructional designer, as did you, that knew of the model and believed in it enough to say, I want to, I want to support this organization because I believe in this model and the work that it does. And for me, part of the reason that I think the Kirkpatrick model is so powerful And the model, we're talking about bringing it back to the basics, is because it is, like Wendy says, elegantly simple. It is flexible. And there's not a lot behind the levels, right? It's reaction, learning, behavior, results. Those are the four things that we need to measure. Now, how we individually measure those things, we can talk about, right? And there may be different things that you're measuring within each, but those are the four things. And it really helps to break down learning initiatives or program initiatives or changes into, when you really know the model, like understanding truly what is our end goal with this program or initiative, so that we are focused solely on the needs, right? Like the what are the critical things, right? Like we talk about critical behaviors, like what are the critical behaviors someone needs to exhibit in order to, showcase the skill to improve this, area of their performance. And I think that oftentimes people overcomplicate evaluation and they overcomplicate their models because they say, the Kirkpatrick model doesn't work. Is it the Kirkpatrick model doesn't work, or is it that we need to think about how are we executing on the model? If you're thinking about evaluation at the end, if you're starting at level 1, yes, the Kirkpatrick model will not work. You will never get from 1 to 4. You have to start at level 4 and plan backwards. And we have to start, being more creative and about how can we be agile and flexible. So those are just kind of my soapbox things on why the Kirkpatrick model. But I would love to hear your background. What did you know about the Kirkpatrick model, and why why did you decide to become an advocate for it when you came to Kirkpatrick Partners?
Yeah, that's such a good question. When I think back on my early days, my very first role in more of like the corporate side of learning and development, I had a supervisor who had asked me, like, have you heard of the Kirkpatrick model? And I was like, no. So you better believe I went and did some Google searches, trying to learn what it is. And then I tried to make sure that I was evaluating the program that I was responsible for, and it kind of ran into a lot of the same barriers, right, that folks in our programs have, where they're like, okay, I think I understand level 1 and level 2. Level 3 is where it gets a little bit messy. And that's because, sometimes training is even seen in the organization as the goal being like, yes, they need to learn, but also they need to be entertained.
Yep.
And I remember, folks would come out of the, onboarding orientation training with me, and they had a fantastic experience, right? Because I connected with them and we, talked about their goals and all these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I was limited just in the structure of my role not to get further. And my organization at the time didn't necessarily ask me to show performance improvement. They were satisfied with level 1 and level 2 data.
Mm-hmm.
But then as I kept growing, I got more into the coaching side of learning and development. And that becomes a lot more about performance and about behavior change. So being really action oriented. And that's where I think the light bulb started to go off, where it's like, well, why are we doing training if we don't have specific behavior outcomes that we are following up on, right? So I think it's been a journey in terms of like learning what the Kirkpatrick model was from the beginning, and then actually internalizing the importance that it really all revolves around behavior change and performance. So I think that's why I've come to really appreciate the model, because it helps you narrow down what's essential. Like you're saying, I mean,
Yeah.
it helps you be able to push back to say, yes, and like this training sounds like it's important to you. Help me understand what you want people to do with the information.
Right.
And it's in so many of our programs, people will say, that's a really good point. I actually don't know. And that's
Uh-huh.
okay. That's okay if you initially don't know, right? If you believe in your heart, like this training matters, you probably can still connect it back to some sort of performance. You just have to think a little bit more critically about what that is. So
Well,
it's
and
definitely evolved over time.
well, and then know that it might have to change. You might have to shift the program a little bit, right? In
Yeah.
order to achieve like those behaviors and the performance you're trying to elicit, right? Like when me too, I'm an onboarding girl, like through and through, love a good onboard, like making people feel like they belong in their organization and
Yeah.
helping them get productive faster. Um, love it. And to your point, right? Like I was an onboarding specialist. I just, onboarded folks and then kind of sent them on their way. But really then when you start start to integrate with HR and hear what managers are complaining about and things like that, that's when your hand gets raised and you're like, well, we need to go back to how they're being welcomed into the organization and be made aware as to what the expectations are of their role,
Mhm.
and the expectations of them being part of this organization and what support that they have. And we need to extend this process from like a structured week to truly a 3 month like more immersive experience where they've got opportunities to connect, right? I
Mhm.
would love to go back to many organizations that I've worked with and completely redesign,
Me too.
onboarding. I have this dream of like a scavenger hunt, right? And it's also almost like this treasure map that someone gets when they first, I mean, I guess I could have said Kirkpatrick Partners to be honest, but here we are. Um, so like a treasure map, right? Like they get this treasure box in the beginning of their experience and they get to learn more about the organization. They start on this journey and they've got these things that they have to complete over time, all with the end goal of helping them be more productive, become part of their team faster and get to know more of the organization, and know where their resources are, right? So maybe I'll do that one day. So if anyone wants to create a treasure map, like, sort of pirate themed onboarding, please call me. I love a good nautical theme, as my anchor will tell you. And if we can somehow convince Johnny Depp to come as Jack Sparrow to welcome folks, I'm also into that idea and I will not turn that down. But with that, I do want to let everyone know kind of what to expect for the next few weeks. So let's talk about this series. So each week, Jordan and myself and Sarah O'Connor, our community manager, we will be taking you through each of the levels and just giving you kind of like the basics of that level and the most important thing. So we're going to start next week as we preach with level 4. And we're going to talk about whether or not it is the hardest to measure. Then we're going to talk about level 3, and that it's not just about a 90-day survey and what level 3 truly is all about. We're going to talk about level 2, and I'm very excited about this conversation. Level 2 is all about learning, but I think that where level 2 does not get enough shining time is around confidence and commitment and the importance of that in order to get to level 3. And then I think the most controversial episode, which I'm very excited about, and level 1, whether or not smile sheets are actually useless. So I look forward to walking you all with you all through this journey. Thank you for joining us for this quick introduction. Probably not quick, actually, because we're about 33 minutes in. But this introduction to the Back to Basics series for March Madness, we are excited to walk alongside of you and let us know a little bit more about your Kirkpatrick Model experience and what you want to know more about. Talk soon, friends. Bye.